Hi guys, welcome back to iFashi. Today's video will be teaching us how to cut and sew a funnel corset. This is the simplest method you'd come across on this tutorial. This is the one we made. See how neat it is on the inside. Like I always say, it's one thing to sew corset, is another thing for it to be very neat. So in this tutorial, you're going to be learning how we drafted the pattern and how we went ahead to sew it. So guys, let's get started. So here's the pattern paper that we'll be drafting on, and here is the marker that I'll use. Like I always say, remember to draft with a pencil so that when you make a mistake you can easily clean it off. Now here is the fabric that we'll be using before I decided to change to the red Ankara fabric. So I've gone ahead to draw out the horizontal lines. So on these horizontal lines are my chest line, bust line, under bust, half length, and the shoulder, which is the beginning. So I'm going to start with the shoulder. I'll take my neck measurement and the shoulder measurement on that shoulder line, and I came down with 1 inch for my shoulder slope, and I'll connect it to meet my chest line. So we're just doing an imaginary neckline. We will not be needing this yoke for this corset. So I just came down by 3 inches, went in by 3 inches to get my regular neckline. So I'm dividing what I have on my armhole line by 2. I came in by 0.5 to connect our armhole curve. So these are regular basic bodies that we already know how to do. If you don't know how to do, if you watch a lot of my videos, you will know that this is how we draft our regular basic bodies. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and do now is to take our nipple to nipple measurement from the bust line all the way to the half length. Even after the half length, I went down with 5 inches to extend my dart. Now on the waistline, we are going to go out by 0.5 on both sides for our darts. So I'm going to connect that 0.5 upwards to the bust line and downwards to the 5 inches I took for my dart extension. Now we're going to connect the midpoint of our shoulder line to meet up with this bust point we just took with a straight ruler. Watch how I'm connecting it. So after doing that connection, the next thing we're going to do now, I'll take my bust measurement on the bust line, and then waist under bust circumference on the under bust, then replace the dart that you have there, replace it to avoid shortage, and then do the same thing on the waistline. Take your waist circumference on the half length line, replace the dart that we took out, and then take your hip circumference divided by 4 on the hip line. That's the end of the top where you want your top to reach. So I'm just adding 0.5 inch allowance for seam allowance, and then I'll make a connection. We're still coming to extend these lines, but first of all, let's draft out our basic bodies. Now after doing that, the next thing we'll take is our side bust dart. This side bust dart, we know that our front waist measurement is longer than the back waist measurement. So the difference between your front and back waist measurements is what you will take here. I use 17 for my front and 15.5 for my back. So 1.5 inch difference is what I'm taking from my bust downwards, because I would slash it out as a dart for the side bust. So after taking the side bust dart, we're going to now take the darts we need for our corset. So on the under bust line, I came out by 0.5 and I used my curve ruler to mark out that curve, 0.5 on both sides. Now after that, connect that dart all the way down to the end of the top that you are making. Now after doing that, we have a new dart. The first dart we took for, it was for the normal basic bodies. Now we've started with the corset. So we're going to go up from this our chest line by 1 inch. This depends on how high you want your bustier, the bustier on top of the funnel corset. This depends on how high you want it to be. You can go up by 2 inches and connect it to how deep you also want the sweetheart neckline to be. So if you use 2 inches, do your connection. So I went up by 1 inch, I connected to my armhole, and I connected it down to my bust line for the sweetheart neckline in the center front. So now on that line that we took from the shoulder down, we are going to go out by 0.25 on both sides. Sorry, 0.5 inch on both sides to mark out 1 inch dart for that bustier. This is to snatch in that bustier to avoid it from opening out. So I'm going to tear down this line I made from the shoulder and then come and tear the side bust dart so that I can close it up. We need it to be close, and in order for it to be close and flat, you need to open up this shoulder and then open up the side bust dart and then close it down. Now that we have closed our side bust dart, this is what we have. Our pattern is flat again. This part of the shoulder that we opened, I'm going to measure what I have there and replace it on the armhole. Also, take your bust measurement and under bust measurement, replace it, because now we are short on our measurements. So take your waist measurement, remember to replace the dart, and then I'm going to make a new connection. If you're using a yoke, replace this opening you have here, replace it, share it on both sides. But we'll not be needing this yoke. I'm just doing it for the case of people that will want to use a yoke on their funnel corset. So I'm just replacing this, the measurement of on the space that we opened on our shoulder on the yoke part. So I'm replacing it, and then I'm connecting my new armhole curve and then also connecting it down to meet my waist point. It's only my waist point that I did not add any excess allowance because I want it snatched. So I'm going to use my curve ruler to also curve the hip part of my top. If you want your top to have this hip shape, curve shape on the after the waist. So I'm going to use this green marker now to mark out the new lines that we'll be following so that we'll not be confused, because there are many lines here as you can see on your screen. So I'm just using the green marker to put us back on track to know the new lines, the new darts that we'll be following. Now after that, I want to get another dart on my side. This is a corset. You can have as many darts as possible. So I'm going to measure what I have on this my side front, because I want to tear it into two and take a new dart there. This helps in snatching your waist very well. So after dividing what I have on my side front into two, I'm going to also take a dart on that waist part, like I said before, to make it very snatch. I'm using my green marker to mark out the yoke for those of us that would want to use a yoke for this corset. So I'm marking out the new lines that we're following. Remember, this shoulder has two red lines, so I decided to mark out the new ones, the correct ones. Now on this waistline part, the new line that we just marked, I'm going to share 0.5 on both sides, which is 0.25 on both sides, because we don't have enough allowance on the waist. We don't want it to be too tight. It is a corset, is allowed to be very tight, but this totally depends on you. So I went out by 0.25 on both sides, and now I have my new dart for the side front opening. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to use my curve ruler to determine how I want the bustier curve to come out. So I just placed my ruler from my armhole point down towards the center front, the bust point of the center front. So I just curved it. Watch the video to see how I made a curve. There's nothing special here. We're just trying to get that bustier that is on top of the funnel corset. So if you notice, I also went up on that center front by 0.5, because I noticed, not up to 0.5, 0.25, because I noticed by the time we join our bustier, this other side front is always longer. So that's why I went up a little bit. Now we have the two fronts. We know it's supposed to be three, but we're not cutting this one into two yet. We want to get the bustier on top first before we tear this one open. So now I'm going to introduce a fresh paper, and then I'll pin down this center front and side front. And I started my pinning from the edge of the paper because the center front will be cut on fold, remember that. And then I ended it on the under bust line. look at the screen very well, it ended on the under bust line, and I started cutting out my new bustier pieces. So these new pieces you're seeing here will serve as the bustier. I'll just curve it because it's curved on the inside. This one is the bustier on top of our corset. These two paper we just cut, take note. So that's what I'm curving, because I don't want it to have that wide end towards the armhole. So I'm also indicating the two sides that will be joined together. So now that we have the bustier out, you can now cut out this curve that we made earlier. This curve was to serve for the funnel corset. Now we have our funnel corset, we have the bustier out. You can now go ahead and tear your side front open. We did not tear it before because we needed to remove the bustier first. So now we're going to label out your paper so that you do not get confused. We have our center front, side front 1 and side front 2, and the bustier. So that's that for the front. We're just going to go ahead and draft the back, which is also very, very simple. I have my shoulder point for the back, my shoulder line, my bust line, and my half length line. Remember, the back waist line is shorter than the front waistline, so take your measurement. So from my shoulder line, I'm going to repeat the same thing I did for front. Take my neck and my shoulder measurement on the shoulder line, come down with 1 inch for shoulder slope, and then I slant it with my ruler, and then come down with 1 inch for the back neck depth. Remember, this is back. So I'll now do the connection down to meet my chest line. See how simple back is going. Now the next thing we're going to do, take your bust measurement, circumference on the chest line and on the bust line, then make your armhole connection from that shoulder slope all the way down. Now what I'm doing here from the waistline down is to determine the end of my top. Remember, back waistline is shorter than front waistline. So what I did was just measure what I have from my waistline for front to the end of the top, and I added it from my waistline for back down to get the length of my top. After doing that, I'm taking my dart for the back. I went in with my nipple to nipple measurements for the back, and then I made a straight roll, and now on the waistline I came out by 0.75 inch on both sides, which altogether will make 1.5 inch dart for back. So now after that, I'll go ahead and take my waist measurement, replace my dart, take my bust measurement, and then the hip measurement, and then I'll do my connection all the way down. So now we will not be needing this back yoke, remember, so I'll just use my curve ruler, a slight curve ruler, to curve out the back depth, and then I extend my dart. So for this back, I'll be using an eyelet loop for the back. If you're using zipper, go ahead and add your zipper allowance. 2 inches or 1.5 is enough. But me, I want to cut off 1 inch for this center back for my eyelet loop. Then, like we did for front, we have 2 side front, so we're also going to have 2 side back. So I divided what I have by 2 on the side back, came out by 0.25 on both sides, and then I connected my dart so that I'll be able to tear this open like we did for front. That's that for the back. The curve of the back, I realized it was too sharp. I had to bring the front to make sure they have the same shape of curve. So I just used my front to trace out the back curve. This is for the side of the back. And that's that. I'll just go ahead now and cut out and arrange all my pieces for you guys to see. It is very, very simple. The front is simple, the back is even simpler. So just go ahead and watch closely and understand it very well. You will understand how simple it is. Remember to always label and indicate the joining part, because these patterns can be confusing when it's too much. We have 3 pieces for back, 3 pieces for front, and by the time you finish cutting, we'll now have 12 pieces altogether. So make sure you indicate so you don't get confused. So here is the Ankara and the plain black crepe I'll be using. I'll just go ahead and cut. I later changed my mind on this Ankara and I used the red one. So I'll just go ahead and cut and iron my ST. Now this is what I have. I've cut and I've ironed. This is the center front. We have 2 pieces of the center front, which is lining and main fabric. And then for the side front and back, we have 4 pieces of each, which is 2 lining, 2 fabric. They've been ironed out, and this is the bustier part, and this is the fabric that I later used. I did not use the other Ankara again. I changed my mind. So now we've finished cutting and ironing, and see how beautiful they are. We've not even started sewing. Endeavor to iron your work. Use stay if you can. It gives you a very, very solid work. Now, like I said, this A, the bustier part, will be cut on fold. So remember to cut it on fold. If you know you would forget, write it on the pattern paper. So we're going to do the fleshing and the bust caging of this bustier part later. But first, we're going to do this funnel corset, which is the corset part on the down. So that's the one we'll start with for now. I'll just go ahead now and pin it, arrange it and pin it down the way that we're going to be sewing them, so that you don't get confused. It's better to pin down your work before going to the sewing machine, especially when you're working with different pieces, plenty pieces like this. So I'll just go ahead and pick my side front, pin it down to the center front. I'll pick the second side front. You know, side front is 2, side back is 2. I'll just pin them down accordingly. When you're pinning, use your pattern paper to confirm if you're pinning the right thing, because your pattern paper and the marks that you indicated on them will show you if it is the right side or not, so you don't sew the wrong side together. So just go ahead and watch closely, see how you cut, and follow the same process to pin down and sew. Now that we're done with the pinning of the front, we'll go ahead and pin the back as well, so that we'll just go to the sewing machine at once and do all the joinings. So I'll go ahead now and pin down the made fabric for the back and lining for the back, just like I did for the front. Now we're done with one part of the back, and this is how it looks. When you're pinning down your pieces, endeavor to use your pattern paper to check. If you feel like you're doing something that is not correct, introduce your pattern paper, check it if you're correct, so that you would know what you're doing. If you make any mistake when you're joining, lose it. Exercise patience when you're sewing, especially corsets, because it has a lot of pieces. So, and if you feel like our video is too fast, we have to speed up, especially this pinning part. If you feel like it's too fast, you can just go to the settings and slow it down, because some persons even complain the video is too slow, it's too long. Go to the settings and reduce the speed if it's too fast, or increase it if it's too slow. Just do what works for you. So this is what we have after pinning. We'll go to the sewing machine now and join together and be right back. Now this is what we have after joining the side fronts to the center front. We've done that for the lining and for the main fabric, and I've also gone ahead to open up my seams and iron. This is very, very important. All the parts that I joined, I opened it up and I ironed it. Endeavor to do that. These are the back pieces, the main fabric for the back, and then the main fabric for the front. The next thing I'm going to do now is to join the sides, which is joining the back to the front, the two back pieces to the front on both sides. So I'll do the same thing for the lining. I'll introduce the front piece and join the two back piece to the front, and then I'll be right back. Now we're done joining the sides together. We now have one piece of both the lining and the main fabric. So we're also going to go ahead and iron these new sides that we joined so that it will be very neat. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to join my sides, the parts that will put our bonings. Some persons put their bone on their main fabric, but I'll be putting my bonings on the lining fabric. So what I will just do, there are different ways to put your bonings. Mine, some persons sew their bone on top of this lining, but what I do, I'll just make a joining on these seams that I've ironed. This is the importance of one of the importance of ironing your seam. I'll just sew it down, then I'll now come and choke this boning inside. You will not see it. So I'll keep that aside and then introduce this bustier part. Now let's work on the bustier part. Now this is the center front of our bustier and this is the side front. We're just going to go ahead. If it's getting confusing for you, use your pattern paper. Place a pattern paper on top and you will understand it. So now we'll just go ahead and join it now. This is what we have after joining. I joined the main fabric and the lining fabric. I'll be using the same fabric for both lining and main fabric. Don't get confused. But I know the one that is lining and I know the one that is main fabric. I also used the air stay. I doubled the air stay for this one. But one of them will be caged. So before we go ahead and cage, endeavor to open up your seam and iron for both the lining and the main fabric. So for the caging, I'll just use my marker to mark out the points I would sew my bonings on top. This can be done free-handedly, as you can see on your screen. Just use your marker to mark out the points. I forgot to make a mark on the middle point because I also placed a bone there. Endeavor to put the boning on the middle. It helps it with the curve. So now this is what we have. I've joined the bone. I did not put on top again because I don't want it to be difficult when I'm turning it with the other fabric. So I just did for the down, I did for the center, and then with the joinings where I joined my side front to the center front, I also added a bone there. So what I'm going to do now is to flesh this caging we just did. So I'll use my hemming gum, place hemming gum on top first. If you have a fiber, it's better to use a fiber. I don't have fiber at the moment, that's why I'm using this wadding. If you have wadding, you can use wadding. You can even pad it up with your stay, just like to consume a lot of stay. Because even after putting this wadding or fiber, you will still cover it with stay. So that's what I did. I padded it with my wadding and then I used stay to cover it. The next thing I'll do now is to go ahead and turn the upper part. I'll make a joining and turn it. Secure it down with a pin so that it will be easy, especially on the middle part. Secure it down with a pin. Make sure all the sides are aligned and then join. Now this is what we have after joining. Remember to top stitch before turning. I went back to make a top stitch and then I turn top stitch on top of your lining. So if you find it difficult to turn, remember to notch, especially this center front that is curved, the sweetheart part. Use your scissors and notch it so that when you flip it open, it will be very neat. And that's what I have here. We're almost done with this bustier part of this corset. After turning it over, I'm just going to cut a straight fabric, this same fabric, to turn this on that part, and that will be all. Always iron your work. Iron, iron, iron. I keep saying it. So I'll just go to the sewing machine now and use this straight fabric I cut to turn it down, and we'll be done. This is what we have, guys. The bustier part is ready. Now we're going to go back to the corset part. So remember I said earlier I'm going to join this place to put my bone, these seams. So I've made joinings on all of the seams. So I'll now go ahead and insert my bonings all through. See how I'm putting the bones, but I'll not put it yet. I want to put a boning on the chest part. You know that curve it has on the chest? We need to put this bone on this curve on the front only, not back, on the front. So after putting that, this new bone will now serve as what will make that curve pronounce, to make it come out really well. So after putting the curved bone on the upper part, before I'll go ahead and chook all of the bones on the seam, which I just did. The bone for the upper part has been placed, and then we've inserted the ones that we'll put inside all of these seams that I made. Remember I said if you don't want to put your bone inside the seam, sew it on top of your lining. That's completely your choice. So now the next thing I'll do now is to introduce my main fabric, and then I'll do the turning on the upper part. When you're putting the bone on the upper part, if you notice I came down with 0.5 inch allowance for my turning. So now that's what I'm going to do now. I'll go to the sewing machine and turn. Now I've joined the main fabric to the lining. I sew it closely to the bone, as you can see on your screen, very neat. So before we flip over, top stitch on top of your lining and notch, so that when you're flipping it over, it will be very neat. Now remember to also sew the sides, this side, which is now our back. Remember the back has been joined to the front, so close down that edge. I've just done that. I've top stitched my neckline and I've notched it, and I've also closed down this back. So I'll now go ahead and flip it out to the right side. Now I've turned it to the right side, and this is what we have. It's coming out very beautiful already. Remember to iron your work. This curved part, you would need to iron it to bring it out very well. You've watched to this point and you haven't subscribed, please remember to subscribe. See how beautiful this funnel corset is coming out already. Now the next thing we're going to do on these sides of the top, which is the back piece, we're going to make a stitch on it now to create a boning channel for that back before we would go ahead and fix the eyelets on that point. Also, the last thing for the tutorial is to close the down part. If you want to leave your down part like this, it's completely your choice, but I want to give mine a little curve on the sides, so that's the reason for the chalk. And then for this bustier part, you use hand needle to hand tack it to the funnel corset, and that will be that. Thank you so much for watching to this point. See how beautiful it is. It is one thing to sew corsets, another thing for it to be very, very neat. Look how neat the inside, you can even wear it inside out. Joking, guys. So I've gone ahead to fix my eyelets, and then closed it down, and then hand tacked the sides. I'll pair it with these shorts, and here is the result of the beautiful funnel corset we just made. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.